So my white, I like titanium white, doing this.
Okay.
Put them all in the same order so that you instinctively reach for color, particularly your dark colors, because, so this is called foundation white. It's an older tube from Winsor Newton, and it's just a heavy, opaque white, so I'm gonna use that today. I like to put my warms, yellow, and I'll do all my yellows here. Yellows, so I'd have my yellow ochre, my raw siennas, all the yellows that I like. The reds, I usually use cad red light and alizarin. That's a yellowish red and a bluish red. And then my blues or greens. And a lot of times I mix my greens and my browns usually. I'll do the warm colors moving into cool colors. I keep them around the outer edge of my palette so that I can save this for mixing. Now, I like to mix little pools of color, which is different from some painters. Some painters mix with their brush, and they mix as they go. And so they'll make a big pile here of whatever they're working on. They just continually add. I've studied with several painters who do it that way, and it hurts my brain. It makes mud because I don't know what I've added. I don't know how many other colors are in there as I've gone. Now, typically they'll scrape it off and they'll start fresh every few minutes. I was taught to do a very detailed palette for skin tones, which was created by Daniel Green. He went into the museum and studied the old masters' paintings and held a swatch of canvas up and made color notes, and he came up with the colors he thought the old masters used most often in portraits. He is a portrait painter. He found that women typically in the old master paintings, before women were out working in the fields, because if you could afford to get a portrait done, you were wealthy and you weren't working in the fields. Women were very pink in color, and men were very ruddy with burnt sienna colors and yellow ochre colors. So he gave us that little tidbit when he started talking about color. He has a whole spiel he does on color, and I'll touch on some of that. So I was said already that I have these little water bottle caps that I put clove oil in. And you don't have to do all this. I just found that a big deterrent for me in painting is having to get all the stuff out and get all the color mixed. And then by the time I get all that done, I gotta cook supper or something. So I leave this out so that I'm always ready to paint. I just close the top. The clove oil keeps it wet. It's not great for traveling, especially this large size, but I know some, Lydia brought a smaller, like 11 by 14 would be perfect if you want to have your paint out and ready to go. Most of my students use palette paper. When they're done, they put a piece of saran or another piece of palette paper on top, fold it, stick it in a baggie, and keep it in the freezer. And it'll last a month, 6 weeks in the freezer. It'll start to get a little skin on it sometimes, and you know, once you're dealing with the skin and you're having to poke it, get some new paint. Paint's not that expensive, but we do that anyway. So today I want to show you how to mix a skin tone palette with just the primaries. That's not always what I do. I learned using Daniel Green's palette, which his main go-to colors were burnt sienna and yellow ochre. They have already been tweaked with a little bit of the complement in them so that they're a neutral color. They're not bright. This is not, none of these are skin tone colors in of themselves. They have to be mixed up. So I thought really basic, especially for those who are just starting, if you can learn what these colors do to make a skin tone, then you can use whatever you want to. Every teacher you go to is going to give you a little bit of a different mixture. So I'm going to start basically, because I got 3 portraits to do this week. I'm going to start with white. You always start with your lightest color, and you add the next lightest, and then gradually add specks of dark into that color. I like this little tiny palette knife because it makes a little nice deep pool of color. And I like to have pools of color ready to use here instead of just mixing as I go, and I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants when I do it that way. So I'm going to start with a yellow mixture, and I'm going to add just yellow. All skin tone is a mixture of yellow and red. It's all skin tone is in the orange family. Obviously, that is not a skin tone. So I'm going to put a little bit of red in it. And you have to be careful. I mean just a speck of red. Now see how orange that got really quickly. That, yes, could be the beginning of a skin tone. Yellow and red, period, bam. If I want to go more in the ochre family, this could go south real easy, so I'm gonna try to make it work. I want to be a little more yellowish on this pile, so I'm going to add a little bit more yellow. So see how yellow that is? Still too icky for a skin tone. So what do you think I should do next to get rid of that bright hue? Okay, if it's yellow, if it's purple, yeah, I want to add a little smidge of a purple color. So I'm going to put a speck of blue. You see how speckish I'm going? It won't even get on there. Come on. Little speck and a little speck. And I didn't have cad red medium out, so I've got a little bit of these two. You see how one is more yellowish and one is more bluish? I just want a primary red, which is right in the middle of those two. Thank you, sweetheart. This is my assistant.
It is. I'm trying to get points.
Yeah, get those points, girl. So here there's a purplish color, and I put a little bit too much in there, but that's okay. So you can see it leaning towards, it's getting a little bit more neutralized like skin tone. So if you're having trouble, just check it with your own skin tone and see, or hold it up. Harriet's got a really tan skin right now, and Reba, where are you, Reba? But you see how I'm going more in the, looks more like a skin tone. I like to make myself a little map. You can do different skin tones across here, but what I would do is spend some time looking at your model first. And since I'm going to be painting her, I'm going to be going sort of in this direction. I wanted a little bit more yellow. My first pile, I want it to be the darkest pile because I can always lighten that. So I'm going to put just a little bit more purple in it. Typically, if you're uncertain about this, make you a little purple over here. Keep a paper towel in your hand like Harriet just reminded me. All right, so that's a real bluish purple. And here's a more reddish purple. I like to mix out to the side so I can make a little map of what I'm doing. So I can see, and this little palette knife really helps you do that. So I can see quickly that I have a violet and a more bluish purple there. For her, because I have my tone purple, I think I'm going to go this direction with a more bluish purple. So I'm going to put another speck of that in here. Another speck. Till I kind of neutralize it. And you see what I'm going towards now? That's almost a Naples yellow. I got so excited when I first started using the primaries like this, and I went, oh, I just made yellow ochre. Darn. And you get all these tubes of paint, and we really don't know what's in them. We don't know how they got them, and you're mixing all these different things. So if you start with just the primaries, you have a real good base for what makes what.
Less is more, huh?
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, then, what I suggest, and I didn't in the beginning, I'd have a list of about 13 colors for you to get, is to start with just the basic colors and slowly add some turquoises, some pretty colors you see at the paint store. Teresa got some at a yard sale this week. And that's what happens. How much, $1 or something?
Yes. And what did you add white down?
Yeah, just added white.
Okay.
So in all of my skin tone piles, whatever I mix up, I want to start with my darkest version, and I always want to mix 3 or 4 values. The most common thing I see is I go around and everybody's mixed a huge pile of the wrong color. And so, what are you going to do with that color? You use it anyway because you don't want to waste the paint. So I like to start out figuring out where I'm going with this little knife and do smaller piles. So let me go back up here and use a little bit more of this and make a little bit, I can do this later. I can make a bigger pile of this later. But you see how just mixing the yellow and purple gives you this color. Now, it's getting a little mustardy there. So the more purple I mix with it, look, I get a little bit darker version of it. I can tweak off this way and put a little more purple, a little bit more yellow. So I like to have a choice of colors to use when I'm painting. Now, I like that color. It's really clean. She's a brand new baby, so she doesn't need to have really dull flesh colors. I'm thinking about and mapping out my plan here. you've got a man and he's going to have ruddy colors. So you want to have a little bit of a plan of where you're going. So see, you'll come up with some colors and you'll go, oh, I don't know. Although that's a little bit brighter. That's not bad. So if you're not sure when you're looking at this, again, hold it up to your own skin, because you're seeing that you're getting, something near a skin color. When you look at it here, you just don't know sometimes. I could hold that up. If I'm going to look at you, I can hold it up like this and close one eye, and I can see that Harriet has a lot more red through there. All right, so let's do a little more of a orange or pinker color for her cheeks. So I'm going to start with this cad red orangey. All right, then red and yellow again is your skin tones. All your skin tones fall in this category. Now that's pretty.
I love that color.
That's beautiful. Now look, that's not going to work on the face of a baby anywhere, but watch what happens when we start mixing white with it. Start pulling it down. That will work in there, somewhere in this range. So I've got dark, medium, medium light, all the way down to maybe my lightest light on here. Oh, I had some yellow in there. Darn. Where I got that. That's all right. So see, that'll work. That's got a little bit of yellow in with it. So already we have two nice skin tones, just using 1, 2, 3 colors. All right. So the lightest light on her forehead is going to be right in here. And I probably will have some cool colors. Let me mix up a color for under her chin and her shadows on her nose. Any idea how I might mix that?
Purple.
I'm going to go back and I'm going to make a really dark orange. Okay. And I'm going to use, I'm going to make orange first. That's orange. Because I would normally use orange and blue here. And I'm going to put some blue in with it. I'm always scared. I'm like, oh, is this going to work? I don't know if it's going to work, because I'm used to squeezing it out of the tube. Yeah, it's going to work. What's wrong with you? Little faith, Christy.
I like it.
So that's a
To them. So you just saw that orange with a speck of blue in it makes burnt sienna. Boom. Now, your different brands of paint are going to go a little differently. So if I need this to be a little bit darker under her chin, I'm going to come out here with more blue. I thought I was falling off the ledge there, but it's it's the thing underneath. Too much blue. So you can quickly see when you've got too much blue. It'll look like a bruise on their face. So you have to. It's always a funny tweak back and forth between how much warm and how much cool. As soon as you get too much cool, you know it. You're like, well, that's like a bruise, too much. So I got to warm it back up with a little bit of flesh tone. So see, now I'm getting a really nice dark version that I could use under there. It might not be that dark, but Sue was asking me about a white palette. And I was just telling her that everything you mix on that white palette will be so dark. Even this down here, you go, oh, I think that's too dark. So on this gray paper, I can easily see a nice even range of the colors that I want to use. And I'm not struggling all the time mixing different things. So I've mixed more red with that. It's getting a little too red for me now. So I'm going to orange it up. All skin tone is a mixture of what?
Yellow.
Yellow and red. Yellow and red. And Helen Van Wyck says all hair is in the yellow family. I don't know if I agree with that, but she says it, so it must be true. All right, so more blue over here. Now that's getting a little ruddy like an old sailor, so I don't know. I'll probably go back over here and keep it fresh for a little baby. And I may go back in here and put a little bit more yellow in here and this color to keep this
Does the
fresher.
clove oil keep it indefinitely?
No, but at least the thing I just threw away had paint that's been in there almost a year.
Wow.
And it had really skinned over, but I could dig in it and get some color out. So, and you'll notice I hammered and stuff on this, trying to get this piece of glass in. But you'll notice this was Hobby Lobby. I think I paid $17 for it, half off. It does seal up pretty much. So people use the white and blue plastic cases, and they work okay. They put them in their freezer. But the plastic is more porous, I think. And so it doesn't, it's not as airtight as the glass. Doesn't keep as long. And again, this is not great to travel around with. So, but if you wanted to have one of these at home, that would be great. Now what I do, and you'll see as I move it over there to do the demo, that I just put a stick in it like that. It would be great if it had a hinged top.
Is there any benefit to using glass versus plexiglass in it?
Well, I had some pieces of plexiglass. I don't know if there's any porosity, is that the right word, to plexiglass. Also, when I got ready to clean my palette, scraping plexiglass with a razor blade is gonna pull plastic off. So I like to use glass for the bottom part. So easy to clean this up when you're done with the glass.
The older plexiglass begins to
Powder up.
You can't see through it hardly.
Yeah, that's true. So I think glass is your best bet. You could use it for the top, I think, but I don't know again if it's quite as sealed with that. So
Where does the clove oil come in again?
the clove oil I put in these little cups, and for some reason it keeps the paint from drying.
Oh, okay.
The lady that told me about this, Rebecca Neef, a wonderful painter, she has like 4 or 5 of these in her studio, and they're deeper, and she puts paintings in there with clove oil to keep them wet, because she likes to work wet and wet through as long as she can. She doesn't like the paint to dry. She uses a slow drying medium that keeps the paint wet, and then she puts them in these boxes and with the clove oil in little caps around them. Now she said put like your fast drying colors or your earth colors, so browns, raw umber, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, those will dry fast, really fast. Reds and yellows will stay wet forever, as you know, on your paintings. I'm gonna go with some blue in here. And I always felt awkward with this palette knife in my hand. It just felt like I had something wrong with my brain. There's an old word we used to use, and I don't use it anymore, but because it's derogatory, but I just felt like I was really deflected. I'll say that. Like, what's wrong with me? I can't use this thing. I use only the back side of the palette knife. So I'll notice people doing this, and then they're like trying to get it off the top because it's bent. You can't get it off the top. So I just use it like I'm spreading butter on toast. I just use it all on that side. And you see, that's gotten too blue. But look at this color here now that I mixed a little bit of my orangey color with the blue. And that's a perfect shadow color right there. And you'll see that. I'll see it around her eyes a little bit. I'll see it around her chin, up around her hairline on the right side. I'll see a little bit of this color. The more I put the orange in it, see, it gets a little bit darker, fleshy, and then this is bluer going down here. I also like, for babies, sometimes I try to figure out what the light source is, and I know she was sitting right here, right where Harriet's painting is, with the north light window open on her. So she's got cool light coming on her face. It helps if you know that, because then when you're putting the light tones on the face, is it bluish or is it warmish? Is it, late afternoon? So I like to come over here and make some grayer tones and maybe even a little bit brighter. Just to put a little bit of kind of a cool, you'll see where I use that in a minute. Make it a little bit lighter. A little bit more blue. Whoops, that's too much. You're just doing specks. If you do tiny specks, because you can kind of tell. If you're having trouble remembering what you use to mix that color, which everybody does, I notice some people write on their palette paper, just put the initials, UB, CR, CL. Or I like to put a little dot like this, blue. Remember, I put blue there, and I put red and yellow there. And that'll help you remember. And you know they've got white in them. So you just make a little map. And the other thing is I like to mix pretty good piles of paint so they last me through the whole painting, and I'm consistent with my colors. So when I used to go to New York and study with Daniel Green, the night before we would mix that palette up in the hotel room. so that we weren't sitting there for an hour mixing up all our colors, because he had a specific way he wanted you to use. And when you go to a teacher's workshop, you should really use what they're telling you to use. Here. I keep my mineral spirits closed most of the time because it does put out fumes, and we don't really, it's not good for our little brains. So, but be well ventilated, to tell you. Oh, brushes I'm going to be using. I sent this in my email, but I can do the whole painting with just that brush. I could do the whole thing with that. What I would suggest that you do, so that you're more efficient too, is to have a couple, if you have a couple of filberts. And the reason I like a filbert is I'm working on a round surface. I don't need any square marks on a face. You can do it with anything. This is a regular flat brush. The old masters used these, and what happened is they found that once they wore them down, they became very useful. So they started making these, which are just graduated bristles. And they make a nice brush stroke for a face. So I'm thinking, what am I painting? Is it a round thing? Is it smooth and rounded? Or is it, if it's a house or a barn, I want a nice squared off edge as I'm, as I'm painting. And I need to make lines and things, but I'm not making any lines on a face. I like to have this is a little mongoose, which is a long, flat mongoose. And it's nice when you get the whole face wet, you can scoop up more color and lay it on real gently. These harder bristly brushes, when you start working wet into wet, you start mushing all your color in, and it makes it muddy. So I like to switch once I get everything wet to a softer brush, and these long bristles are beautiful. And then I told you all about the Big Lots set of 25 that has these little soft watercolor brushes in them. And you'll see that I'm going to use these after I lay in the little tiles of color. I'm going to use this to soften each little segment together so that I don't have chunky. Now, if you want to work impressionistically, you can leave your little chunks of color. But I'm going to be smoothing her. She's a baby, and I don't really want her face to be chunky at all. And I am going to put a little bit of raw umber out. I like to put a little bit of the the hair on while I'm working on the face too, while it's wet, especially for a baby, so everything can